now.
Okay.
Shall I jump in then? Yeah, okay, so thank you everyone for giving us this time. I think we're together for about 40 minutes to an hour from now. I guess I'd like to take this opportunity very quickly to ask us all, manage our expectations about what we will and won't achieve during this conversation. And I'll draw, if I might, from an email that Karen shared, and Carrie, I think you said the same points here, but the original expectation is that we'd get to exact, clear and concise messages from us as a core group, which would then be able to be shared with volunteers and public. I don't think we're in a position to do that. I think the landscape has changed, the actors have changed. I think if we as a core group get to understand what we, under the guise of Sussex Green Living coalition, want to achieve from this, and I think secondly, what behaviour we want consumers to take. With my WWF hat on, you would not be surprised if I propose this is about zero waste, and arguably the position that we could take is that we advise consumers of the exact situation, and the facts that I'll ask each of you to share your understanding of is that our difficult plastics are not being recycled in the UK, and that our responsibility is to reduce the amount of packaging and plastics that we are putting into our waste systems. Now, that's quite different from what our original aspiration was, but I think the knowledge that Neil has shared with us, I think the knowledge that we have gleaned from conversation and the lack of clarity that is able to be shared from supermarket brands leads us to that stage. So I'm going to ask each of you in turn to offer me a very brief statement on what you believe we should achieve in relation to this difficult problem. We know that triggers are not recycled because they're not disassembled. We know that a lot of the supermarkets packaging will either go to landfill or go into incineration or be exported. So I'd like us just to kind of share very briefly what you think we should be saying to our SGL audiences. We'll do a recap of that, and then we'll agree the consensus of opinion, I hope, as we go through this two-prong agenda. What do we want to happen with these hard plastics, and what behaviour do we want consumers to take as a result of this kind of coalition discussion?
I think you said hard plastics there, hard to recycle.
Hard to recycle.
Just to clarify.
And within that, I'm including things like polyethylene, I'm including polypropylene, I'm including LDPE, which is the lightweight plastics, and we actually find those lightweight plastics on things like bread wrappers. I'm also including within that multi-layer, so anything that has got a plastic and an aluminium, crisp packets, for example. So I'm going to start, if I might, and apologies, I'm not doing this in any hierarchical order. I'm going to go to Neil first, because Neil very kindly shared the results that we knew. We all suspected supermarkets are overwhelmed and can't cope with the waste. And after Neil, I'm then going to propose to go to Rachel, and then I'll come to everybody else in turn. So the two questions are really, what do we want to happen at a big picture level? And then secondly, what behaviour do we should we be advocating that consumers take? And then I'll finish up with Carrie to kind of draw that together and then see if we can get to a consensus out of this meeting. Would that be okay with anyone? Everyone? Anyone raise any red flags as we go through the process? No? Okay, great. So Neil, I'm going to mute myself so you can't hear Brucey barking, and I'm going to hand over to you on those two questions, please.
Okay, I think you've analysed it very correctly, actually. I am very far from being the font of all knowledge at the moment, because because actually knowledge is really quite hard to get hold of, and I think as you can see from what I've emailed you, even the supermarkets themselves, who are now starting to collect soft plastics, they are far from knowing what actually happens to all this stuff, and even though Sainsbury's, for instance, and other supermarkets seem to have got into a scheme with the encouragement of wrap, which purports to have some degree of self-certification, good monitoring, I'm not at all sure that they can be really confident that some of their plastics are not going to end up in a cement kiln somewhere in Poland, just as Tisco's does. And from a pollution point of view, a cement kiln is worse than a conventional waste incinerator, because it doesn't have the same precautions taken against filtering out long-lasting pollutions. As for your priorities, yeah, I think chasing the zero waste objective is a very good thing to do. I mean, recycling plastic is actually the least worst alternative, shall we say. It is not the best alternatives. You know, recycling plastic is actually a damage limitation exercise. But the best thing is to stop those plastics from coming into the system in the first place. So encouraging people to actually buy less plastic, basically, is actually the top priority. So there are various zero waste certification schemes which I could point you towards. I mean, one of the things which I do on behalf of the UK Without Incineration Network is to go to various meetings hosted by Zero Waste Europe, and they're setting up certification schemes for neighborhoods, for cities, for businesses, you know, so they may not necessarily be applicable in the UK, but they are things which we could start looking at and see if we could actually apply to be see if we would qualify, meet the criteria to be a certifying, you know, to be certifying bodies for those certification schemes, and actually see if businesses and places in the UK would be interested in that kind of certification, you know, whether it would add anything to their value at all.
Super. That's great, Neil, thank you. So I think what I've got there is, yes, you agree with the zero waste, and stop buying the packaging. I'll share something now on some targets that are being advocated, and I think you're right in terms of how do we evolve that to the next step. Now, whilst I think that's a wonderful idea and we definitely want to do that, we have to be conscious of the available resource to be able to drive that sort of big initiative forward. So taking on another commitment on a highly emotive and important topic, when Sussex Green Living is arguably under-resourced, may not be the right time. However, if each of our organisations could divide and conquer and send us a consistent message, that might be the right way forward if it was based on a Zero Waste Europe framework. So I definitely would like to hold on to that idea. I think Rachel had to lose a connection. She sent a message to everyone.
I think she's there, but she's turned her video off.
Oh, okay, right, super. So in which case I'm going to ask those same two questions now for Rachel to share. What do we think should happen on this big issue? And then secondly, Rachel, what behaviour do we want consumers to take? And I want to also thank Neil. I don't think I thanked you at the beginning there, so apologies, I'm coming back in. So Rachel, over to you on those two big questions, please.
Thanks, Elle. Okay, what do we want to see happen? One, I'd like supermarkets to be much clearer on what they are doing with these soft plastics they are now advocating that they recycle. I think the Co-op is the only brand that I've seen that has actually been honest and said, we will recycle as much of this as we are able. But like with your TerraCycle collections in the villages, Carrie, the wrong materials are being placed in these supermarket bins, and that will be the material that will end up being turned into energy from waste instead of being recycled because it's classed as a contaminant. So I would like supermarkets to be clearer. I would like, once we've got that complete assurance that they are recycling what they say they are, that residents can take those materials and keep them out of the waste stream. But what behaviour do we really want to see? For me, it's always about that prevention. You know, let's not be using this single-use plastic packaging in the first place. and signposting people to zero waste options, of which there are now plenty going around. You know, I use Good Food Club and other local businesses. I live in Arran, so I'm on the coast. And I've got Eco Swap in Bognor, and I've got promote those as best we can. And really, it's just getting that waste prevention message across. Use resources wisely and sustainably.
Super. And I'm just going to build on that. Apologies for Bruce barking, but
back to you, Elle.
Thank you, Rachel. That's super. I'm just going to build on that and ask you a question, if I might, very briefly. Are there tools available, and I'm talking about communication tools, PDFs, directories available at the moment from the council that could be shared, i.e. pointing people to the right places for zero waste living?
We have some information on our website, but it's difficult for us to signpost to a particular business or a particular TerraCycle collection. We tend to use the Recycle Locator, which is the nationally run RAP resource for where people can recycle materials that we can't in our general curbside recycling bins. But when we're at public events, we do tend to do a bit of research for the location we're in, and then we normally promote whatever's locally available, whether that be a TerraCycle collection point in a church hall, or a local zero waste shop or organisation such as a community pantry, community larders, fridges, etc. So we do try and promote as best we can, but you can imagine that doing that for the county wide takes a great deal of resource to keep that information up to date and current, and we just don't have the resource for that.
That's great, Rachel. Thank you so much for that summary.
I just asked, Rachel mentioned the Recycle Locator. Is that what's on Recycle Now, or is that something different?
Hang on. Yeah, it's the Recycle Now one.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to Caroline, I'm aware you're there. I'm hoping everything's okay. I'm going to task Carrie to give her answers to those two questions. And then I'll go over to Caroline, and then Paul, if that's okay, I'll come back to you to kind of bring that summary. And then over to you, Carrie, if you wouldn't mind, and then I'll do a summary of where we go after that.
Thanks very much. Agree with what the others have already said. With my two different hats on, so from the Eco Church's point of view, we're looking for clear information that we can feed through our networks. I'm connected with a lot of churches locally, but also across the country through the National Horsham National Eco Church Network. So we're waiting for like the clear information that we can share with the public. And then with my No Incinerator for Horsham community group hat on, we're very keen that as little as possible goes into any incinerators anywhere, including the cement kilns. So it's just being part of all that. I haven't had time to read all the stuff that we've already had through because we've been recovering from COVID, but very much wanting to share information through the networks I have with the two hats that I wear, although they're very different, but they overlap. I can't think of anything further to add at the moment, apart from to say thank you all for coming together for this meeting. It's great.
Karen, I'm just going to ask you then, what behaviour, from your position and from an Eco Church experience, what behaviour do you think we should be asking parishioners, supporters and consumers to be taking?
Giving them a clear message as to what to recycle. Now, I recycle as much as I can, but I've got a whole stack of stuff that I'm not quite sure what meant to do with it, and that was even before the supermarkets starting their recycling. And if I'm unclear with it all, I can't imagine how confusing it is for other people. And also some practical solutions as to how to store it at home before you take it to somewhere. So it's sort of making it easy, yes. And of course, when you go on holiday, we go self-catering. It's completely different with different councils, collections and different colour bins. So ideally, it should be the same across the whole country. that would be a good goal, because then it would be consistent when grandparents visit, etc. Everything would be less contamination then.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Paul, I appreciate it, Karen. I'll come back and build on that after I've given Caroline and Paul the opportunity to speak. Thank you. So Caroline, I'm going to ask you those two same questions, knowing that our recycling isn't recycled in the UK, and knowing that what volumes we do have we're struggling with. What do you think should be happening, and what do you believe consumers should be doing, or we should be asking consumers to do?
Okay, well, firstly, I think it's important to say it is difficult to get information and to verify information. My target in the last week started off as being to contact local supermarkets with the aim of asking them what happens to stuff, but quickly realizing you can't expect individual supermarkets and individual staff within those supermarkets to be armed with all that information. So I think it's better to go through either a head office, or if there's some sort of a sustainability linked department within these big supermarkets. So I very quickly then realized I was going to turn my attention to actually doing huge media searches. Now, through work, I have access to thousands and thousands of journals. So I've spent the last couple of days only looking at things from 2021, pulling out key articles where other people have already done the groundwork for us. Why reinvent the wheel? And firstly, I'd say I did come across a number of articles that were suggesting there was no suggestion from Greenpeace or anybody else that it was the supermarkets directly dumping stuff abroad. And I think it's important to make that clear that, a Tesco's bread bag can get to Poland or wherever through all sorts of sources. And they were saying they actually found COVID test kit wrappers which do not go via the supermarkets within this stuff in Turkey. So I think, and it did actually say Greenpeace, and it was in an article in the Independent, clearly stated they did not suggest that supermarkets were dumping that stuff. And I think it's important from my perspective. I'm not trying to demonize any particular person here. To me, that is not the way forward. I'm much more a positive person, and I certainly think from Sussex Green Living point of view, I want to be saying what people can do rather than generate negativity. So I'm looking for much more sharing good practice of like refills locally, like Town and Way, places like that. So promoting what just people like me every day can do with their shopping and so on. Just taking forward my point about doing the research, and it was many hours that I've done, I tried to list the key supermarkets, and what I have done, I'm happy to type this up rather than go through it later. For the 12 key supermarkets, I've found for most of them good contact names, again, through these journals, through national newspapers. So they were quoting people, for instance, Director of Quality at Tesco is Rachel Bradbury. Now, we need to be using her, not just going to the store manager at Broadbridge Heath. To me, these supermarkets are so big, they must have somebody who's responsible for this. We need to be asking them those questions. I also found, somebody was saying there, none of this stuff is recycled in the UK. I don't actually think that's necessarily correct. One of the most positive reactions and the comments I found were actually from Co-op. And I'm not saying this for any reason. I happen to shop in Co-op, but that's not why I'm saying it. And they were talking about recovering soft plastics. They're sent to somebody called J-Plast. So they were very open about companies they use. They turn the plastic into plastic granules. They then make these things into products such as bin liners, buckets, material for construction. It was very easy to find several named people who were putting their names to this: Chief Operating Officer, Food CEO, Director of Sustainability. They had lots of people who clearly within their job title had roles that were linked to that. Tesco do link with a company called Sabic. So I was able, through doing these journal trawls, to find quite a lot of companies that are recycling on behalf of those supermarkets. Following this meeting, if Carrie wanted me to, my next tranche of action was going to be to research those companies. What does Sabic or J-Plast, where are they based? And one of them was north of England. So it's not correct to say that this is only going on outside of the UK. That is absolutely incorrect. So I went through Aldi, Asda, Co-op, Iceland, Tesco, Morrison's, Lidl, Sainsbury's and Waitrose, screening all these articles over the last 12 months. I've got names, good contact names for most of them. I'll put that on an email. I don't want to list that, waste people's time here. A number of them listed companies that do manage this plastic, melt them down into pellets. Some of them were making them into benches to repackaging products, like Tesco's use it to repackage their own products. So there is a lot of good practice there, and I personally think it's important. We should be championing and celebrating where we do see good practice, rather than focus on what is the others are not doing, because I think, you know, all the will in the world, if you try to stand up to these huge companies and say you're not doing this, I don't think they're going to take any notice of me. The other thing I did want to ask, I think it was Neil or whoever was part of the Greenpeace, I found a very interesting article in the Independent in January 2021, and Greenpeace themselves, obviously they do an awful lot of work and research on this, and we don't want to again jink. They ranked the top 10 supermarkets in terms of, you know, least damaging, if you like, use of plastic. They're not saying these are brilliant at managing plastic, because we don't want plastic, but that was interesting. And what I was going to ask Neil is, does he know if there has been the similar sort of ranking system that's a bit more current? And I think that's the sort of thing we should be saying to our local supporters. Sussex Green Living should be saying, Greenpeace have researched these under these 20 sort of areas, and we consider the 10 best. So Waitrose was top, Aldi was second, and obviously it doesn't mean that they are the best at everything, but ranked according to whatever measures Greenpeace use. And I'm happy to trust Greenpeace, they know what questions to ask. But I wasn't aware of that top 10 other than doing this research for Carrie. So I came across a lot of things. I'm thinking, that's good. We need to be sharing that information. And then what we should be doing is encouraging, I feel, our supporters to spend their money preferably at those rather than those in the bottom of the ranking. So even if we are using our own power of spending through, yes, they might not be perfect, they might not be doing everything we want, but they are the better of the bunch. That's the sort of thing. So for me, in terms of what we want to happen, the other thing I think is really important, and I came across in a number of these newspaper articles, was West Sussex, I think we need to remember, are really good in terms of what they take. My family live in Hampshire. They won't even take butter tubs. They won't take yogurt pots. They don't take, well, probably 3/4 of the stuff that West Sussex take. Also, West Sussex are very good at trialling new things. They're taking buckets and hard plastics and plant pots. They're trialling those at some collection recycling centres. And that's good practice that needs to be promoted. What a lot of the newspaper articles were suggesting is actually we need to take this at a bigger scale than us, quite frankly. What they suggested, they're saying that local councils should be taking all this soft plastic, not even the supermarkets. They were saying that if you really want to help solve the problem of recycling these, rather than individual people having to take it back to supermarkets, which is a bit hit and miss, they don't know what to take, it's too far away, what you should have is curbside. Now, the big issue with that is cost. Now, can we maybe suggest the supermarkets should be contributing to the council's fees to collect this stuff? And then there would be a central sorting, because Brighton, which is only less than, I don't know how many miles it is from Horsham, not many, they don't take a half of the things we do because they haven't got the right recycling facility like we have at Ford. So to me, if you had a much better national picture, much more curbside collection for people who either lack of mobility, can't get to the supermarkets, have stuff delivered, that would be a much more cost-effective way of recycling those, and then you could track far more easily where it's going, what you're doing with it. So I think I've got lots of things buzzing in my head, having read these however many hundred newspaper articles. But the key thing in terms of your questions, what do we want to happen? I think we should be trying to lobby for better UK council collection to take away this stuff. I think, yes, we do need to know what supermarkets are doing. Some are more transparent than others. One of the best articles actually in terms of supermarkets I found was The Grocer. That is, I don't know how often it comes out, The Grocer, but it had a really good, and I trawled through it several times. It's 2nd of October, if anybody's trying to track that back, if you've got access to that sort of a journal, I do have. 2nd of October 2021, The Grocer by G. Knott, N-O-T-T, and he'd already done a lot of the work that I was thinking, I'm glad I read this article before I tried to contact all the head offices, because he was saying, this is what Tesco's do, this is the person to contact. Great article, bit out of date. So again, if Carrie wants me to follow that up, I'd be writing to The Grocer and G. Knott saying, have you had an update, Mr. G. Knott, on what you found a year ago? We'd be really interested to know, did you find out any more? What has happened since that time? So your questions, Elle, which you wanted us to focus on, what do we want to happen? I've said about, I think, better national collection, more done at council and more done at curbside. Yes, transparency from the supermarkets, but to be fair, I think some of them are transparent. It's just knowing where to read and look at that stuff up. In terms of our local supporters, I don't think we want to be giving them more and more work to do, but they are very keen and they're very conscientious and they're more than happy to do what they can to help. So I think it's targeting their volunteer hours to what we feel is most beneficial. But I am very keen that we should be promoting positive practice locally and nationally, so people can, you know, adopt those positive practices and support companies and supermarkets that are doing more than the others. So I think that's
okay, Caroline, that was amazing. Thank you so much for that really comprehensive summary. Thank you too for the depth and intelligence of work. When I proposed to Carrie that you would be the perfect person to do this work, you far exceeded any expectations that I thought you would get to. So it's just an amazing quality. And I think there are some points that you've made I'd like to address, but I don't want to take this time away from Paul. I want Paul to come in with his opinion too. But there are a couple of points I want us to not lose as we go through this that you've made. And I definitely would propose that Carrie and I pick up with you separately to build an action plan around some of the things that you were proposing as next steps. But before I do that, Paul, I'd like to come over to you to follow on with your views, please.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Caroline, that was amazing. Certainly outperforms my research, I think. Yeah, I mean, from our perspective in Dorking and sort of Mole Valley, which includes Leatherhead as well, you know, number one for us is avoid packaging in the first place. Which is kind of obvious. In Dorking, we do have a shop called Eco B, which is a zero waste shop, so we're trying to promote that. We also have Mid Surrey Community Fridge, which is like diverting fresh food from landfill and waste to be used, so we're promoting that. So there are two things, both of those use very limited plastics, yeah, so they're the ones we're going for first in the hierarchy. I think the next thing after that is transparency of what is actually happening when you take both the council collection, transparency on what's actually happening with that, and transparency with what's happening with supermarkets. So in Dorking, we did do a supermarket survey, Lidl, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Marks and Spencer's, Waitrose, all the ones that are relevant there. It was very much a store-based survey, hugely very interesting, and we compiled the results, which are not final yet, into tabular, so you can compare and contrast. Huge differences, really interesting doing it that way. In Dorking, Sainsbury's is the one that's kind of come to the fore in terms of offering soft plastic recycling, which actually does seem to be really actively being used in Dorking. Now, we went into the store to find out what actually happens with it. They had no idea whatsoever, and that's the same everywhere else. So we contacted head offices or points of contact, which kind of sounds like Caroline's done a lot more research on that than us. We actually got a really good answer from Sainsbury's. It seemed reasonably honest. They they told us that they use empty lorries that takes it back. They told us it goes to Europe, so it isn't recycled in the UK. This is specifically soft plastics. It goes to Europe, and a bit of investigative journalism. We think it does go to a factory in Belgium where it is reprocessed with the input of a lot of energy, melting it kind of back down and back into the process to make plastics. So in a way, that's kind of a good thing, but it's bad in that it's been done overseas. It's bad that they have to put a lot of energy back into it. So we could do lots more research, but for us in Dorking, it's Sainsbury's specifically. So we're promoting Sainsbury's. We're promoting TerraCycle, which is a Tadworth version, which goes to the Tadworth Children's Trust. So it's a charity donation thing. Sainsbury's, TerraCycle. In the road that I live, we've got a particular house that collects the whole street. We've been promoting that in a number of other streets in around Dorking. That was there before Sainsbury's came along with soft packaging recycling. So we're now in this sort of slight conundrum as to, do we push and promote more TerraCycling, or do we push and promote Sainsbury's as the soft plastic recycler? So jury's still out on that one. And last point really from me is, yeah, we have used recycle now. We find recycle now is kind of good in that, but you have to really hunt around in it, and you have to have the time and be prepared to hunt. If you're looking for a specific thing at a specific time, yes, you can find it. But so what we've done is we've created one double-sided sheet for people to stick on their fridge, which just lists all the product items and where to take them, and it covers everything. It covers the Mole Valley District Council collections, as well as all the other stuff like toothpaste. And we've given options, you can take this to Sainsbury's or TerraCycle in these locations and so on. And we've done some of the more awkward ones as well, like rubble and things like that. So that was an interesting exercise, but we're only at the early stage of kind of promoting what we've done there. Our council is quite positive, and we're wrapping all of this up in what we're calling circular Dorking, which we're actually trying to kind of get off the ground as a kind of a behavioural change thing in Mole Valley. That's probably about as much as I can say, yeah.
So what I'm going to take from the examples that you've shared with us there is that you're trying to promote zero waste, but it sounds that the majority of the work at the moment is trying to manage the volume of recycling and where it should go, and ask for greater transparency from the supermarkets, and evolving towards more of a circular approach in terms of waste or packaging in general. Have I got the right understanding?
Yes, generally kind of getting that waste hierarchy. I mean, we're kind of in a recycle economy, aren't we, at the moment? And we've not made that step to a circular economy. Long way to go, and it won't work for everybody. So we kind of need to, we need to get. Doesn't matter what we do, a lot of people are still going to be throwing their rubbish away. If we can get them to move to recycling, that will be good, and if we can get those people who are active recyclers to kind of move to reuse, then so it's kind of a gradual step, and it will be different for lots of different people.
Super, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to kind of pick up on a couple of points, and then I'm going to come back to Carrie, if I might do. With my WWF sustainability hat on, I'm very much around circular economy at its truest form. I'm very much about zero waste, where nothing goes to waste. And my current position on this topic is that we should be stopping buying things in packaging of any way, shape or form. And we have the opportunity to lobby the supermarkets. And I think everybody, supermarkets, businesses, councils, consumers, charities, we all have a role to play in educating. And I think all of you have said that same thing around how do we start to educate people. I think in my current thinking, and Carrie, you'll make the final call on this from an SGL perspective, is that we want to have all of those parties coming together and reducing the amount of packaging that comes into any of the waste streams. And we should be moving away from a recycle mindset into a zero waste mindset. And we have the opportunity to stop buying things that are in difficult to recycle packaging. Now that might not fit everybody, and as we know, everybody has a different lifestyle and a different way of doing it. But the opportunity for Sussex Green Living here is to be sending a message to consumers to stop buying products that are in packaging that we know our local authority cannot handle. Now that will have an effect on the supermarket. The supermarket then also needs to be challenged through Caroline, and I think everybody said the same thing, to give us greater transparency. Because the principle of polluter pays, as in you put that thing on the market, how do you take responsibility for what you put on the market? Excuse me. Stop it. Sit down there. I think we have to keep that top of mind. If you are generating profit from something that you know cannot easily be managed in the marketplace, you have a responsibility to be taking that back. Whether you are a major brand or whether indeed you are just a supermarket that is taking a 2 to 3% margin from that. I think the opportunity for Sussex Green Living is in 3 key areas. And Carrie, please do give me your feedback on this. The number 1 is to be promoting the 7 R's under that zero waste banner, which has to start with rethink what we buy. It has to be the opportunity of promoting where those zero waste shops, those refill shops are, and working with the supermarkets, taking the points that you guys have made, and in particular, emailing all of those key contacts from the grocer to say, what is your action plan in moving you forward towards the targets that the UK have set? And I've said that shared for you there, which is removal of own label, anything that's coming from the co-op or Sainsbury or own label. Where are you about meeting your 50% target? Just to pick up on a couple of points, at J-Plast will use prime plastics. They're a major manufacturer of plastics, as is SABIC. SABIC is an oil company, and they have a plastic polymer producing, and they are moving into the recycle field. But the difficult plastics, in particular flexibles and LDPE, which is what we find on bread labels, that's the stuff that is often contaminated with food, so will not find its way into a recycling stream without what's called a hot wash. So therefore, the 3rd key message there is, if you have to buy something in packaging, can it be composted at home? There have been a number of different initiatives from RAP which give you that guidance, which says it's red, amber and green, and it can be recycled or it's difficult to be recycled. So the opportunity is for consumers to lobby the supermarkets, ask for greater transparency, but really start to use the power of don't buy things in packaging. Now, Paul, what that will do is that those people who've already got an affinity will start to move into that lifestyle. But hopefully, by which time all of the other national initiatives and regional initiatives where local councils will start taking action and consumer groups will start pressurising government to make those changes. It's a long plan, and I think we have to look at it from a short, medium and long-term perspective. What can we do right now? What do we want to happen in the long term? And what action can we drive through our supporters? So Carrie, I'm going to come to you if that's a lot of information that you've had to disseminate there. And then I'll also open the floor again one by one to anybody to build, challenge, or indeed opt out of the next stage of discussion after Carrie.
There we go. Thank you so much, everybody. That was just brilliant. I know, many of you have shared incredible resources, which Neil in particular, I have not had time to read. But I think that was a brilliant synopsis. And thank you, Caroline, for all the research that you've done. And that's just incredible what you've done. So I really appreciate it. And I think, yeah, Elle, you and I need to catch up after this meeting or on another occasion, because I think Elle's away at the moment, to actually plan going forwards. And yeah, it would be wonderful, wouldn't it, if we could all feel really confident about the supermarkets. But yeah, we're not at that point, are we? So I think you're absolutely right, Elle. I've written down here short, medium, and long term, and I think those are the sort of plans that we have to put in place. As I said earlier, we've got a meeting next week, which Colin, a waste prevention advisor, is going to come and talk at the Sussex Green Ideas about West Sussex County Council recycling. Joy's going to talk, what might be Joy, Elle and I don't know, about TerraCycle and our position in relation to the supermarket. So I do want to get to a position before next Wednesday as to, you know, what we're going to be saying. I think most definitely, you know, we need to get together a really clear bullet point short-term plan that says refuse, 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 refuse. Yes, your 7 R's. My top R is a refuse, rethink. So yes, I think we need to put a lot more emphasis on refills. And so Suzanne, who's not with us today, who has been helping working with Caroline a little bit, she has been doing some research with one of our trustees on a refill options in Horsham district. So that is a resource that we can share with you, Rachel. And I think there's some work to be done around that, Elle, with TerraCycle and what they're doing with the supermarkets, which I'm not really clear. I think that's a trial. Tom from TerraCycle is doing this trial on Loop, isn't it? And focusing more on the refill trials in the supermarket. So I'd like to learn more about that, and whether that's something that we can drop into our meeting next week and these communications, I don't know. But I think, yeah, they are very, very clear. This is our short-term plan. Refusal is at the top. Refills is way up there. So we've been offering a refill service at the Sussex Green Hub once a month, and on the float we've got a refill panel as well. For wherever we go, we try and adapt it so it signposts people to refill services. But we need to get a really good resource on Sussex Green Living and really push that out in our verbal communications with our village volunteers, through our newsletter, through the hub and everything. So that's high up on our priority. I'd really like to get to a position before next Wednesday where we could say within Horsham district, we are for the moment most confident with this supermarket. The Co-op, Sainsbury's, I don't know who it is, but that's where I'd really, really like to get to, for the mental well-being of our volunteers in the villages and our Horsham Wombles, so that we do feel as confident as we can be at this moment in time that actually, you know, what we can't send to TerraCycle, this is where we want to take it whilst we're navigating our way through this very tricky landscape. And one of the other things I think that I spoke to Joy very briefly before this meeting, we need to be clear with our villages and our end clients, if you like, is as all of you know, Walker's Crisps are no longer, I think it's stopped right now, hasn't it, a week or so ago. Walker's Crisps are no longer actually sponsoring the recycling. So in theory, we could divert those to the supermarkets, but talking to Joy this morning, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, we still have got the KP a TerraCycle brigade, and although it's not about the money, I hasten to quickly add, but although we only actually can send to TerraCycle a very small amount to the KP brigade, so the majority will not be, there will be no financial return. I think at this moment in time, we feel most confident about TerraCycle recycling the resources. So I think in the short term, the crisp packet recycling, for me, the message is let's just send it to TerraCycle through HP. Yeah.
Can I just come in there? because the important point that you mentioned there was for the confidence levels of our Wombles. And you will make the final call on this, but I think sharing the reality of the situation becomes really important. And if we don't have a sense of confidence that this waste is being managed with integrity, the question for me is, how does that then affect the Wombles? i.e., we've gone to all of this effort, we've sorted all of this, we've put it into the right material types, and still we find out later it's gone somewhere else. My experience has shown that that's very demoralizing. And I think the message has to be, we cannot with 100% confidence say that everything that you manage goes into the correct waste streams. And I'm open to challenge on this. We know that a percentage does, and that we know that some supermarkets, such as Waitrose, such as Co-op, and such as Sainsbury's, will do an audit to find out where their waste has gone. But I think that my learning has been that we have to be honest up front and say, this is what we've discovered so far. This is what we're advocating, which is what gets us back to the zero waste living. Don't buy the Walker's crisps, make your snacks at home. And therefore the Sussex Green Living website has a page on, these are really super easy things that you can make to go into your kids' lunchbox that will take no more than 20 minutes. You know, I think that is the opportunity to say you can still take an action. Now, again, as I said, I'm open to challenge on that, but I think the zero waste and stop buying or buy only home compostable would evolve us out of this thinking it's all going to be okay and aren't we wonderful because we're recycling stuff. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think yes. I mean, what I would like to hope is if we could come up with a communication strategy along the lines that we're talking. As I've said to Horsham District Council, and I probably haven't said to Rachel, what I would dearly like is that we are working in synergy with the councils and our village volunteers. I know we're predominantly Rachel in Horsham District, but that we're singing from the same hymn sheet, and that we are actually pushing out communications with the same sort of messaging and pointing to resources. So yeah, the idea, Elle, of simple, easy to produce, healthy snacks, put it in a pot as a resource is a good one. I haven't really thought about that, but that would be one way of encouraging all the schools that we go to and families to move away from all these plastics. And a really good resource, and we start with Horsham District, but we have, which most of you know, we've actually just finished a 3-year business plan or charity plan for Sussex Green Living with the help of our wonderful trustees and Elle and some of our other communications volunteers. So that's pretty much finished now. And what we're talking about is pushing the refills and pushing the repairs, clear, concise messages, but in synergy with the councils. That is our hope. That's what we want to do. And we're working with Karen brilliantly with Horsham Eco Churches. So we're singing the same song, aren't we? And bless Karen normally reads our newsletter and then regurgitates it to how many churches, Karen? Loads.
Okay, so I'm just going to I think she's on the phone. I think what I'd like to do now, Carrie, is move over to Rachel. And I think the opportunity, as we said before, around developing the position statement, I'm going to ask for some votes on a moment around 3 key points. But before I ask for your votes and your inputs, Rachel, how realistic is it that we can find synergy, shared assets and shared messages for Sussex Green Living and this coalition today that will align with the council objectives?
I think it's an aspiration and it makes sense. I think our key goal to reach as many residents as possible across the county is to keep our messaging simple. And if we go off in too many tangents about too many specific materials that can't be recycled at their curbside collections, residents do become confused. So it would need careful working. And I'm not the person in the position that would make that call. I do like the idea of sharing social media content amongst the groups. That's one of our main ways of getting messaging out now. Facebook tends to be very, very good for us, but we're building a good Instagram following as well to try and reach a younger demographic. Creating synergy is an aspiration. I'm not sure how realistic it would be for us in terms of our messaging is very seasonal dependent. We also have to communicate issues around recycling centres, opening times, issues, you know, whether there's a fire or a vehicle blocking access, and some of it's very reactive comms. And so we have to be careful about how much we put out, so there's not to confuse people. I think that's the key thing, is about keeping it simple. And if we go off, we've been sharing the wrap materials on the soft plastics recycling at supermarkets, but we don't have resource to develop a lot of material ourselves now. It's something that we can definitely look at, and I will speak to my colleague Sarah Miles, who deals with the communications for waste prevention and recycling in terms of the social media and newsletter content. Obviously I feed into that, but she has, you know, her and my line manager have the ultimate say, I suppose, about how we go forward with that. So I will take this to them at our next team meeting.
Super, that's lovely. Thank you so much, Rachel. Okay, guys, I'd like to try and bring us together, coming up to 4 o'clock now, around some voting on some key messages or some key statements that will allow us to build a position statement for Sussex Green Living. And I'm just going to ask you please to vote on chat, whether you agree with this as a principle for Sussex Green Living to adopt, or whether you disagree. So hopefully everyone can see their chats. Please just message to everyone. Do you believe that we should incorporate a key message around zero waste as a principle for Sussex Green Living? So if you could just put there zero waste yes or zero waste no. Do you believe that Sussex Green Living should be promoting that as a message within its communication strategy? Super, Caroline, I'm not sure if I see you. Apologies if you've messaged and I haven't. Yep, okay, super. So I think that's great. Thank you so much for that very quickly. Do you believe, second question, that Sussex Green Living should be educating and sharing information on the 7 steps to sustainability, which as we probably all remember, starts with the rethink message, not the barking, but it's the rethink, refuse, reduce, repurpose, reuse, repair, and lastly, recycle. So the 7 steps, if you could vote on that, which is rethink, refuse, reduce, repurpose, reuse, repair, and lastly, recycle. If you could vote on yes or no for that. Okay, I think I've got everyone. Am I missing anyone? Caroline? Again, apologies. Yep, there you go. Apologies, it's all coming through. Super. Okay, so that's good. So Carrie, we're starting to evolve what the key messages and the position statement are around this. Next one, slightly more controversial, and this is a phrase. Should we be stop buying products that is in difficult to recycle packaging? So voting on this, please. Should we be using the phrase stop buying products that is in difficult to recycle packaging?
where are we going to be using that statement? What do you mean to use that statement? That isn't clear.
In communications that would be on websites, or would be in Instagram posts, or would be in Twitter. So for example, if we're talking about a zero waste lifestyle, you could use the phrase, avoid buying products that are in difficult to recycle packaging.
That's different to your statement initially saying stop buying them. Avoid is very different to stop. I wouldn't be happy to saying stop. I think that's a bit naive. Some things can't be obtained in a recyclable non-recyclable packaging, like there might be some medications or whatever. So I don't like your phrase, avoid, completely stop using that. It's try to avoid. So do you want me to rank that as a no?
Please feel free to qualify it, Caroline. Put it in the comments. That'd be super. So no, you wouldn't advocate for stop, but yes, if you're in support of avoid, that would be helpful. Great stuff. And I think everyone agrees with you for making that really good point. And some great quality coming through on these notes, which Carrie, because you're recording, you should be able to access all of this messaging later. So I think I'm getting a consensus around avoid, and I'm going to make an amend on my sheet there. I've got two more questions.
Can I just say, sorry, Elle, can I just say, I'm a big believer you need to use positive words. So
Agreed.
Rather than try to avoid, you need to put, please try and purchase things that are in non-plastic packaging. To me, it's very important you get the wording of this right, because I think you can really turn a lot of people off here if you just say, don't do this, don't do that. Where possible as well, where possible.
We've got that captured on recording. I think that goes into the communication strategy. So I won't lose that point, Caroline. Thank you very much. I'm going to move us on. I've got two more questions before we start to move to summary and wrap up for today. Do we vote yes or no, please, around advocating buying products or looking for products that are in home compostable packaging? If you could vote yes or no, would Sussex Green Living be advocating for products that are in home compostable packaging? Just a yes or no to home compostable.
You can't have a yes or no. You got an essay.
No, well, qualifications okay, but no essays on this one right now. Great stuff with care, super, great qualification there, Neil. Lovely, and of course that as I'm saying there, it's complex. Okay, and this is my last question here. Should Sussex Green Living be calling for greater transparency from manufacturers and supermarkets as to where their packaging goes? This polluter pays concept. Should Sussex Green Living be advocating for greater transparency for manufacturers, brands and supermarkets on where their packaging goes? A quick yes or no for me. Great stuff. Super. Okay. So because we're recording, we'll have all of this voting captured, and we'll be able to develop a position statement and get us into that short, medium and long term. I'm going to open the floor. If you could raise hands for anybody who wants to make any additional comments before I hand over to Carrie for a summary and a meeting close. Neil, I think I've got you up. I'm going to go on mute and open the floor to you first, and then anyone else who raises hands, please, for summary and comments.
Let me just say welcome to Pat. Pat is from Dorking, a wonderful partner, and climate activist in Dorking. So welcome.
Okay, I'll try and keep this short. I've got a few comments. First of all, I wanted to say hugely impressed by Caroline's research. Actually, hugely impressed. Thank you for that, Caroline. One or two answers to questions which you raised, Caroline, actually. a question which you implicitly raised, actually, why does West Sussex have a wider range of collectibles in their recycling than East Sussex and Brighton and Hove? It's because the contracts in Brighton and Hove and East Sussex are tied to the use of the incinerator in Newhaven, which they would like to get out of, but which they're not allowed to. And there's a penalty clause if they try to get out of it. So they are tied to sending stuff to be burnt in Newhaven. You asked whether another bit of research is coming from Greenpeace on supermarket league tables. I don't know at the moment. I will try to find out. I know that Greenpeace are going to be doing more research on supermarkets. I don't know what form that is going to take at the moment. Those league tables were done in conjunction with the Environmental Investigation Agency, and they didn't really cover plastic disposal. They basically covered what plastics the supermarkets were putting on the shelves, and didn't really cover much about disposal at all. This is such a fluid situation. This is such a fluid situation at the moment, and a lot of it is going to depend on government legislation anyway. So it may just be that there aren't enough handles, as it were, for Greenpeace and the environmental agency, the EIA, to actually grasp, to actually do a worthwhile survey, and to do a worthwhile league table. But I'll raise the question anyway. You're probably aware that some supermarkets are already toying with zero waste packaging free aisles. So Waitrose are trialing it in 1 or 2 places. Marks and Spencers have trialed it. Asda have trialed it. So one thing that Sussex Green Living could do as a policy would be to encourage the supermarkets to actually broaden those trials and to actually bring them to Sussex, and to encourage that way forward to have more packaging free offerings themselves.
So which supermarkets was that, Neil?
Waitrose have trialed it, Marks and Spencers have trialed it, and Asda have also trialed it, but just in 1 or 2 locations.
And I think Neil, where they got to on most of the trials, that it was a success, and it was, I want to say, 11% cheaper, I think, for the consumer. And also, one finding, I think, I forget who did the survey. It might have been RAP actually who did the survey, but they found that there is less food waste with unpackaged fresh food. I mean, contrary to what the supermarkets would typically tell you, that plastic packaging actually prolongs shelf life, and so you get less food waste. In actual fact, the survey found that there's less food waste when there's less plastic packaging, and that comes round to cost. We're in a cost of living crisis, which is going to deepen over the next 12 months. So there's another opportunity for Sussex Green Living to actually show people how they can save money and actually save food waste at the point of purchase, and actually throughout the life of that food, and actually reduce their cost of living by going plastic free. And does anyone know about the list of refill stores? And it may well be on the Zero Waste Living websites. I know Zero Waste Europe, Zero Waste UK. But because the reason the supermarkets haven't rolled it out is because of the capex, or rather the operational expense, the reconfiguration of the stores, the remerchandising. So at the moment, where we have refill stores in our local communities, usually run by independent retailers, that's an immediate action that can be taken, and arguably support financially the local traders. And I think that's a short-term action until the major brands reconfigure their strategy for refills within supermarkets. But I agree with what you're saying, but I'm keen that we don't take we support our local community if their price is advantageous to the particular family, and I know that's usually a constraint.
And on the plastic disposal side, particularly with the soft plastics, I don't know what's going to happen with TerraCycle. If you're looking for some sort of robust approach, it looks as though the government and RAP are throwing their weight behind this scheme, which has been joined by most of the supermarkets, and it's at the moment far from clear whether that will deliver any better results than Tesco have. But there is definitely a shadow, as it were, hanging over Tesco's plastic disposal at the moment because of that, because of the investigation that was done by Bloomberg, in which Greenpeace were also involved, apparently. I think it'd be possible, if you wanted to play tactically, you could actually play Tesco off against the others, or you could play Tesco off against Sainsbury's and say to Sainsbury's, yes, we would like to point people towards your plastics recycling scheme and the co-op, as rather than Tesco, because Tesco have been found wanting and are still investigating themselves what happened to their own recycling, because there was a Tesco employee who was treated to a trip to Las Vegas by the recyclers without telling his employers, and etc. So while there's we can actually play them off against each other tactically without telling them, of course, and try to get more transparency and more commitment from them in the process. It might be a lever that we can use to get greater transparency. They themselves may be struggling to get that transparency, but only they can actually try to achieve it and actually bring it forward to us.
My experience of working in this sector has been that the head office may well put something on their website, which is often aspirational, because when it goes down to the store usually are so busy trying to hit their KPIs and their revenue per square metre that the sustainability goes out. It's only when they're tracked against their weight measurements that they'll deal with it. So again, I'm conscious of time. I'd like to thank Neil for your input on that, and open the floor to anybody else who would like to either challenge or build. And I can see Caroline's raised her hand, so I'll come to Caroline next. Carrie, because I think we're going to close at 4:30. Is that right? Yep, Caroline, over to you.
That works.
Right.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Paul, I love the idea, Paul, of that double-sided A4. You can just look up on your simple index where everything goes. Could I be really cheeky and ask, I'd love to see something like that, and maybe we could perhaps design one for our local area. I don't know, could I get that from do you have a website, a bit like we have Sussex Green website, or would you need to
I actually posted it. I posted it on this chat, so there was a PDF a little bit earlier, but I can send it to you.
If you could send it as not a PDF, that would be really useful. I mean, we've got one which I shared in the chat earlier, which does, well, after this meeting, once we agree our position, does potentially need updating, and it does need to include things like the flower pots and the other plastics that, it's a little complicated, isn't it? But in West Sussex, we can recycle things like that at specific household waste recycling facilities. So,
yeah, absolutely. It's a constant moving feast, actually. So it's something that needs to be a living document that changes as thinking changes. Yeah.
Harry, just to qualify, if he doesn't send it as a PDF, it's going to be very heavy. With the amount of images and copy it's on, that's probably going to be about 20 meg. What format do you want it in? And should it be a week?
Oh, I haven't seen it. Ours is just a table with tick boxes against the supermarkets.
Yeah, ours is a table in an Excel file. It's quite small. I can send it. I'll circulate it to this group.
Yeah, thanks. And then we can do perhaps an exchange and see whether we can. I mean, obviously it'll be different in your area, but that'd be great. Thank you.
Anybody else like to offer any challenges, things that we might have missed? Other areas to look at?
I think Paul actually passed comment earlier. Sorry, I'm not very good at listening, engaging and reading all the chat, but I did notice you posted about TerraCycle. We have liaised with TerraCycle, the head of communications at TerraCycle, about recycling, about the position, because one of our Wombles who works in the waste management industry saw an article about TerraCycle, and it raised questions about recycling, or whether they're recycling or not. And I did contact the head of comms, and at this moment in time I still feel most comfortable about TerraCycle over the supermarkets. You know, yes, there was a mistake. It happens, and that was admitted. But yeah, I don't know. It's really, really difficult, isn't it? But I feel more confident with them than I do the supermarkets at the moment.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Right, thanks, Paul. I'm going to kind of summarise where I think we got to, what I think are some of the next steps, and then in the last 5 minutes ask you to build on any action. So we got to a position statement which needs drafting into an A4 document that Carrie, I will help draft out for you to send to Mel for comms. So where we are with SGL and recycling and packaging as an issue. One is we advocate a zero waste lifestyle, and the opportunity is to share a toolkit of how to be zero waste in West Sussex. We advocate the use of the 7 steps to sustainability, and they would be drawn out and detailed. We advocate the avoidance of buying products that is in difficult to recycle packaging for Sussex. We advocate the use of refills, and the opportunity is to provide a list of the refill stores in West Sussex. We support the supermarkets in driving forward the removal of packaging for own label products, and we will take an action to work with Caroline and some next steps to contact each of the supermarket brands in our area to ask them what is happening with their packaging. We support the use of buying products in packaging that is home compostable. Now there is a logo for that, and that logo is carried on a lot of packaging that says you can recompost me at home. And we would be calling for action for local councils, NGOs and businesses to be working at a regional level to be reducing the amount of packaging that is going into landfill. And for product manufacturers and supermarkets to provide greater transparency for consumers about what is happening with their packaging. Now, I will type this up, Carrie, and I'll draft you out a position statement for you to send over. But are there any other bills? And Karen, thank you. I can see you've got your hand up there first. I'm going to come to each in turn. Yes, no for bills, and then start to close us out. Karen, over to you.
Could you add incineration on the reducing amount of packaging? Because for West Sussex, most of the waste is incinerated. Probably.
We want to reduce the volume of waste to incineration. Yeah.
It just needs to have landfill and incineration, or incineration. So both are there. Is that right, Neil? What do you think? Yeah, he's nodding. Thank you.
That's great stuff. So I'll get Carrie to sign that off as CEO, but I think it's a great addition. Thank you very much. Anyone else want to build or add content for that position statement?
Yeah, I think for me it sounds great, brilliant. Actually, just a little tiny thing, Elle, on the refill, we need to bear in mind is we do not sign up to TerraCycle recycling schemes that we don't agree with. Yeah. And things like plastic toys, for example, there are schemes for specific manufacturers for their plastic toys. We don't sign up to those. Now we don't. There are also ones for recycling the plastic pouch refills.
Yeah.
So I'd like our comms very much to focus on the refill of the bottle and not buying the refill pouches.
Because pouches are still, flexibles are still really difficult to recycle. They're the wrong polymers at the moment.
We want to refill, not
refill existing containers.
Indeed.
Great stuff. Lovely.
Could I just add there, Carrie, with refills, in my head, I'm like, I take my own container and
Yeah.
get it filled up with sultanas or rice. So I think it's whatever the refill available in your local area is, but try to, minimise packaging.
Yeah, no, it's just many of the supermarkets have their aisles, don't they, with the plastic pouches.
Yes.
You can go and get your washing up liquid or your shampoo or whatever, but those still have to come to TerraCycle to be recycled, which they half the time they use that to so no, it's the bottles, it's the half bottles we want to be encouraging. Yeah.
Super. Okay, great. Any other bills, please? No. Okay, I'm going to start to close us out. I want to say thank you to Carrie for putting me on the spot with no preparation.
I knew you could do it. I
want to say thank you again to Caroline. Amazing.
Can I add a quick comment, Elle?
Oh, certainly, Neil. Yeah.
It is basically around cost of living again, and what Carrie was saying actually reminded me when she was talking about pouches. An awful lot of people, particularly people who don't have so much money to spend, will be buying small quantities of goods, which tend to be, they have more limited shopping choices very often.
Yeah.
And we have to avoid getting into a situation where we are regarded as being, we are all typically white middle class people of a certain age who can afford to be aspirational and a bit idealistic, and who are not living in the real world where we have to buy goods wrapped up in plastic from our neighborhood shop quickly because that's all that we can afford to do. So amongst the aspirations, I think, for Sussex Green Living is that we have to be is to be helpful, proactively helpful to people on lower incomes who may not otherwise have choices in actually how they source what they buy.
That's exactly why I've actually asked Suzanne if she'll do some research in the first instance on bottle refills, and then we've talked about moving on to food, because we know historically being green, it was more expensive. But I would love to feel that actually refills, and you said, didn't you, Neil, that the research showed the zero waste packaging trial that it was 11% cheaper. That's what I want to be able to show, if possible, that actually being green doesn't mean it costs more, but I might be wrong.
But I think the point that Neil's making there, Carrie, is a good one, because most low-income families will go to the pound shop. And as you and I both know, all those short-dated pound shop products usually are in some form of really hard to recycle packaging. And usually it's multi-layer because it's about to go out of date, etc. So I think it's a really good red flag, and we mustn't come over as patronising when this messaging is being developed, which is why we'll send it to Mel as the comms expert, and she can make it be appealing and engaging. But great red flags. Thank you, Pat.
Not for discussion really, and sorry I'm so late, but are you mentioning takeaways? I've probably missed the discussion on that.
We haven't discussed.
We haven't talked about takeaways. Please, if everyone's got time, I'd like to expand on that point. Yeah, Pat, over to you.
Well, just that so many people have takeaways, and they are all, I've never seen a takeaway in recycling, and I think that is a very good way to go. And I've put Manning Tree, a small village in Essex that has become.
I can't hear you.
BBC. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you missed that last bit.
Right, Manning Tree, MANNING Tree, small village in Essex that's become really sustainable. BBC News has done a feature on it, and one of the things they've done is to get their local takeaways companies to produce takeaways in compostable containers. So I think that's perhaps not for now, but it's definitely a way forward, and perhaps for a later meeting.
Super. I think it's a great flag. Let's put it on there and see within the zero waste if there's any insight that we can share on within that concept. Lovely.
Yeah,
thank you, Pat. Great stuff. So just recapping again, I think we've got something to draft into a position statement for Carrie. I want to thank everybody for their contributions, for their patience, for helping us have a nice flowing meeting. I hope I didn't close anybody down who still wants to raise a point. But Caroline, Carrie, myself, let's book something in the next couple of days to take the actions away that will support the comms and the website information and the briefing document for the volunteers.
Fantastic.
I'm proposing that I close us down. Carrie, do you want to have the final words?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody. I know that we have far too many Zoom meetings. I really appreciate everybody's support. It's really great to have you Dorking climate activists on board. I know we're talking a lot about Surrey, but as we know through the South East Climate Alliance, we're about copying each other, replicating and, you know, taking best ideas and replicating them in our areas. Thank you, yeah, Caroline, loads for all the research you've done. Thank you, Elle. I'm sorry I put you on the spot, but I knew you were the girl for the job. And what we will do, if we can exchange your document, Paul, happy to give you ours, but if we have a look at yours, if that's all right, your table.
Yeah, critique it, please.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not perfect, and it's a moving thing, to be honest.
Absolutely, no, I totally agree. And then perhaps we can, you know, share that back, and if it's any use to you, then yeah, you molest ours. And it would be great, Neil, if you are able to persuade Greenpeace to bring an up-to-date league table on the supermarkets. That would be really, really great if they could do that, wouldn't it? So keep us posted, and then maybe we can revisit this in I don't know, a couple of months' time or something, and we can relook at the assets that we've produced and see where we can go from there. So can Elle and Caroline just stay on for a second so we can see if we can get a date in our diaries? Yeah, thank you all very, very much indeed.
Great inputs, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pat, for joining us too. I'm going to stop the hold on, I'm going to stop the stop my record.